Spider-Man. Spider-Man. Radioactive Spider-Man. Flashback to summer 2019. The most popular movie of all time has just hit theaters, and the follow-up to it features one of the most popular characters in fictional history. This character is in a giant war between two mega companies in terms of rights of who owns what, and this movie represents the ending of a previous contract between these two companies. The movie winds up being a success. Matter of fact, it's the most successful of this franchise's history. Flash forward to a couple months later, drama breaks out between these two companies as the original owner of the company wants to take back the rights. I'm talking about Spider-Man. Now, you're probably watching this video like, what does this have to do with you, Jaron? Why are you even making this video? Well, if you know me very well, or if you know me at all, I am a massive Spider-Man fan. As a matter of fact, I'm wearing a Scarlet Spider t-shirt right now. Like, I love Spider-Man, I love Peter Parker. He's probably my favorite fictional character of all time. I've made music about this man. I have pictures of me being drawn as Spider-Man. It's safe to say that I am probably the biggest Spider-Man fan that I know. So when the news came out that Sony was trying to take back Spider-Man, I had some issues with that on a variety of different scales, mostly because the studio politics were really mucking up the story and integrity of the character and the stories that are meant to be told. Safe to say, the whole Spider-Man situation was pretty crazy. All over the news for weeks. People were trying to figure out who was gonna own what. Was Marvel gonna get the full rights? Was Marvel gonna buy out? Was Disney gonna buy out Sony? All these rumors were flying around. We all know what ended up happening. There's another Spider-Man movie coming out. But during that time was a very interesting time, especially on the internet, as people began to speculate what was going to happen with the characters, the previous Marvel universe, and what was going to happen with those characters that they created in the universe that was already being manifested from Far From Home. This is where I come in. So it started with a Facebook post where I actually wrote a quick little synopsis that broke down how I envisioned Sony continuing the franchise, because they still own rights to all the characters and all the actors and they're all under contract, how they would continue the franchise without Marvel being involved. So I wrote like a little synopsis and I screenshotted it and I put it on the Spider-Man subreddit. And to me, that was it. That was it. That was it. But flash forward a couple days later, I'm working in film class, doing my thing, shooting on a red camera, getting it in. It's tight. All of a sudden my phone buzzes and I look at it and it's my homie. And he says, "Yo, Jaron, is this you?" And he sends a link. So I click on the link and it's actually a link to a very popular Instagram account. The Instagram account was talking about my pitch that I put on our Spider-Man and my story. And the headline, if I recall correctly, says, "Spider-Man fan pitches best sequel to Spider-Man." And at the point in time when I looked at the post, it had like 15,000 likes. My notifications were blowing up as people were tagging me in the post. And I didn't really think much of it because I know how Reddit works. Reddit, if you post something on Reddit, it tends to spread pretty quickly. But I decided to dive a little bit deeper into this. So I went ahead and Googled my name and figured out, I went ahead and Googled Jaron Ikner Spider-Man, click. And turns out that a couple of different sites had picked up this story, including comicbook.com and IMDb. And what was happening was that these other sites were picking up these news reports with the headline saying, "Fan pitches best Spider-Man sequel." And it was all over the internet. I think there's maybe 30, 40 articles all over the internet about this, about my pitch. And for me, I've gone viral a couple times. So for me, it was like, this is pretty cool. But you have to remember, I'm also an opportunist. And I think I'm a pretty decent writer. So for me, I saw the opportunity to go ahead and write a full script. But, there's a lot of factors involved here. And I wanted to present this as a challenge to myself because there's a sense of urgency. I know how it is when you go viral. It's a small window to really do anything with it. And most of the time when someone does go viral, it's not something that it's like, oh, you're viral, now you're famous. Usually you go viral and then that's kind of it. But me, I saw opportunity. I'm a writer. I'm coming out of film school. I'm a filmmaker. I'm trying to break into the industry anyways. And I knew that there were some eyes on me. So I posed myself a challenge. I went on to Our Spider-Man and I said, hey, I'm going to go ahead and write this script, entire movie, in about 10 days. I wanted to write it in a weekend, but I realized that I had to make sure I did this right. So we went ahead and went in and we challenged ourselves to write the entire script in 10 days. And we put it up on Reddit and it got a couple thousand views that day. A couple people hit me up about it, but mostly my friends and family. I did have a couple conversations with an agent about this, and his advice honestly wasn't the best. And that was basically it. I mean, obviously I had dreams that I was going to post this script up on Reddit and Kevin Feige was going to see it and be like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever seen. And he was going to fly me out to LA and I was going to write the sequel to the next Spider-Man. But for me, that was never a reality for me. It would have been cool if that happened, but obviously for me, this is an opportunity to flex my brand and really show off my writing talent. So I took the script and I just threw it up on my website, JaronIkner.com. It's still up right now, you can go read it. And continually, my website gets a lot of hits just because that script is still up on Reddit. It's a really good marketing tool for showcasing my ability to write. And keep in mind, I only wrote it in 10 days. And the feedback that I got in the script was pretty good for the most part. A lot of people seem to enjoy the script. They like my approach on how I handle Peter Parker. They like the overall arc of the story. They like the addition of the extra characters. All in all, people seem to really resonate with the script overall. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. Well, what was the story, Jaron? What did you write for this? So let me break down a quick synopsis. The movie, if you remember the end of Far From Home, the end credit scene ended with Peter Parker's identity being revealed by J. Jonah Jameson on a Jumbotron in Times Square, as Mysterio is the one who had this footage doctor to make it seem like Peter Parker was responsible for his death, also revealed his identity in the process. So that was the cliffhanger of Far From Home. Now, the tricky part about all this was the fact that we had to write this script without including any of the Marvel MCU characters. They all had to be removed from the story in a way that made sense and made this story self-contained in a way that progressed the previous story from Far From Home, separated itself from the MCU, and established a new universe in the process. So it ended up being a little bit tricky because there are some major factors about the previous Spider-Man movies that we could not ignore. One, the fact is the Iron Man factor, and the fact that he had created this whole universe that Peter Parker existed in. Mostly in terms of the costume, the existence of Happy being basically Peter's bodyguard by the end of Far From Home. These things had to be removed. So that kind of tied into the theme of how I was going to approach the script. Logistically, what it came down to was finding another movie where a person is on the run and they're escaping. And one of the most popular films is The Fugitive. So I did a little bit of research on The Fugitive and I realized that I wanted to kind of make this a bit of the framework for the script, where there are people after Peter Parker. He's guilty until proven otherwise, and there's a lot of people gunning for him. What it came down to was realizing that there's a lot of people hunting for him, which brought me to my villain. Kraven the Hunter is probably one of my favorite Spider-Man villains of all time, and he is one of the few that has not been featured on the big screen yet. So he was the most obvious choice to be the one to go after Spider-Man in this situation. So we have Peter's kind of drive in this movie was just to basically protect his family and clear his identity. And then we have the antagonist in the form of Kraven the Hunter as the one who's trying to get him. And once I had these pieces, it's just a matter of filling in the blanks. J. Jonah Jameson was actually the key to all this because of the fact that at the end of Far From Home, he was the one that kind of launched this whole fugitive thing for Peter Parker. So for me, he was the driving platform and carrying the device for this film. So the script starts with J. Jonah Jameson basically declaring war on Parker. He hires Alistair Smythe. Now, comic book fans and fans of the 90s TV show know Alistair Smythe as the creator of the Spider Slayers. And hardcore comic book fans also know that J. Jonah Jameson hired Alistair Slythe to create Spider Slayers to go after Parker. So it made sense for J. Jonah Jameson to bring him on to the show, introduce the Spider Slayers, and this kind of acts as the general baddie of the script that Peter Parker has to deal with throughout the movie. The twist in all this is that the Spider Slayers are actually based on the framework, biology, and genetics of Kraven the Hunter. Kraven the Hunter in this universe is actually a famed reality TV show host who goes into the wild and hunts animals and uses them as a trophy. This is a nod to the Ultimate Comics where Kraven the Hunter is a reality TV show host, I believe in Australia. So it lines up. After the Spider Slayers attempt to capture Peter Parker and they fail, Kraven decides to take matters into his own hands and goes after Peter Parker. Peter Parker, without the help of Happy and access to Iron Man's gear, he is no longer he's not able to maintain his suit. So he has to go back to his original suit from the very first movie, which is kind of looks like this, but reversed basically. He goes back to his original suit that's going to be slightly modified based off his own knowledge and what he has access to. He's currently living in a train yard, and Mary Jane, MJ, comes to visit him and brings him food and stuff like that. Eventually, Kraven and Parker meet, and Kraven defeats Parker because, for one, we're dealing with a teenage version of Peter Parker who is, maybe a year in at the absolute most as Spider-Man versus a famed, trained, killer hunter fighter. So, on paper, there's really no way that Spider-Man is going to defeat Kraven the Hunter in a straight-up match. It's just not happening. This leads to Kraven kidnapping Spider-Man. The thing about Kraven is that he actually has a live TV show where he streams his hunts live. He already declares that he's gonna go after Spider-Man. He will be his greatest hunt. So he streams this all live as he kidnaps Spider-Man, which is in front of millions of people who watch this stream. It's a pretty crazy scene. Peter Parker wakes up in a strange laboratory. From here, it is revealed that Kraven was actually hired by Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn has been observing Spider-Man and wants to experiment on him and use his genetics to do a variety of different things, etc., so forth. In order for him to test this out, they kidnap him and put him into basically like a danger room X-Men type of deal where he has to fight his way out in order to be free. Which he does. He eventually escapes, injuring some people in the process, but we will get to that a little bit later. On the way out, Kraven chases him down. This is where the kind of fugitive nod comes into play, because as they race to the forest, eventually they get to a cliff with a waterfall. There's some dialogue, basically where Peter is pleading his innocence, and Kraven doesn't believe him. So what does he do? He jumps off into the water, and a very fugitive-like ode. And that's basically the most fugitive part of this script. Peter eventually washes up on shore and decides to hitchhike back to New York, where he meets up with Mary Jane, MJ, who has been working on a suit, meaning that she took the old suit and worked on it, and just kind of tweaked it and messed with it to basically build the suit into a new form. So Peter gets a new suit at this point. That's basically a MJ modified suit. This suit has a lot of different features that helps him defeat Kraven in the final act, when Kraven basically snaps and tries to attack Mary Jane and Aunt May. There's a lot of police involved. He's over here murdering police. It's a very kind of violent scene, as I realized as I wrote this, but there's a final confrontation between the two, and of course, Spider-Man wins. Side note, so there's actually an entire subplot in the script that focuses on Mary Jane and Aunt May teaming up with Jane DeWolf as they try to clear Peter Parker's name. This is actually very important in the grand scheme of the universe. I figure I mention that real quick. There you go. The plot twist of all this, I guess this would be the after credit scene, is that we cut back to Norman Osborn's laboratory. Norman, who was injured in the escape from Parker, basically goes to a room where it's revealed that he took Peter Parker's DNA, and there's a version of Peter Parker trapped inside a cage. Now, whether this is the real Spider-Man, a clone, or something else, we don't know. That's the cliffhanger, but basically what this does is sets up the next movie, which would focus on Norman Osborn and the Clone Saga. And that's basically it. But obviously I very glossed over this story. And if you want to read it yourself, feel free to check it out. I put a link in the comment section. Also, if you are interested in maybe me writing Spider-Man 4 and a sequel to the script, let me know in the comments. If I get enough likes and subscribes, I might just write it. Ideally, this is mostly just a writing exercise. Once again, I wasn't planning on writing the next Spider-Man movie, although that would be a dream, and it is on my goal list to make my own Spider-Man movie before I die. You heard it here first. It's gonna happen. But this was fun. I really like the fact that people enjoyed the script and they were able to read my writing and really introduce myself to those who may have or may not have been reading the script. And there's a lot more to come. I'll be making more and more videos where I talk about other scripts that I've written. I have a Ninja Turtle spec script that's awesome, and other stuff. I don't know what we're gonna call this show, but this is just me just kind of talking. I appreciate you guys watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, read my stuff. And if you're a writer and if you have any ideas or if you want to bounce some stuff off me, hit me up. I'll put my email in the comments. You can contact me. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.